Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever looked at a forest and wondered what you see first, the trees or the green? Well, today we're diving into a fascinating question about how our brains process groups of things. And it turns out our first impression might not be what we think. This paper asks a super simple but profound question. When we look at a bunch of things like a forest full of trees, what do we notice first? Is it how many there are, how big they are, or how close together they are? There is a popular idea that our brains are wired to prioritize counting things. Number sense. It's been argued that this is a fundamental part of how we see the world, and it's even linked to our ability to do math. But what if that is not entirely true either? What if sometimes something else is even more important to our first glance? Scroll abstract, look out at a forest. What do you see? You see visual masses of green, you see large numbers of leaves, you see the various sizes of the many different trees. Scroll, imagine you're staring out at a huge forest. What pops out at you? Is it the sheer count of trees, or is it more about the overall feeling of greenness, the density of the trees, or maybe the average size of those trees? Scientists have long debated this, and the big idea in cognitive science suggests that number, the count of things, is the VIP. It is thought to be the most easily and quickly grabbed piece of information. So, when you see that forest, the theory goes, you are automatically processing the number of trees before anything else. Scroll. For introduction, we rapidly extract all sorts of information from the visual world around us. Crucially, the visual system represents not just properties of objects and scenes, but also properties of collections or ensembles. Scroll, but here is where this new research throws a wrench into the works. The researchers behind this study looked at the evidence for this number bias and noticed something. Most of the arguments that number is king were based on comparing it to just one other thing, cumulative area. That's like saying number is the best because it beats not tripping over your own feet. But what about other dimensions? What if other features are even more compelling? Scroll. 5 number as a unique dimension number perception is commonly thought to arise from a universal number sense. DeHaene, 1997. That allows for the discrimination and estimation of sets of objects universal in the sense that it is present early in life and throughout the animal kingdom. Scroll, the researchers specifically wondered if average size might be prioritized over number. Think about it. Usually, when we compare how many things there are, we might also be looking at how big those things are on average. Is our brain more impressed by a large number of small things or a smaller number of large things? They ran a bunch of experiments, 13 in total, with over 2,000 people to find out. Thrope. 6 is number truly special. In this ocean of mixed results, there is one study that stands out as a particularly compelling demonstration of a genuine number bias. Ferrigno and colleagues 2017 demonstrated that adults across multiple cultures, children, and non-human primates all preferentially categorize visual stimuli based on their number, rather than their cumulative area. Scroll, they wanted to see if their participants, both adults and children, would notice changes in average size more readily than changes in number, or vice versa. They used different ways to test this. One way was through categorization tasks. Think about sorting toys. You might sort them by color or by type or by how many you have. Scroll. 9 methods: transparency and openness. For this experiment and all subsequent experiments, the sample sizes, primary dependent variables, and key statistical tests were chosen in advance and were pre-registered. Scroll. So, in their first experiment, they trained people to associate a specific shape, like a diamond or a star, with either more or less of something, but crucially, they messed with the training. In some cases, people were trained on stimuli, where number and average size varied independently. Then, during the test, they'd present stimuli where number and average size were in direct opposition. Would people group them based on number or size? Scroll. 10 results and discussion. The results of experiment 1AC can be seen in figure 2F-2H, as is evident from the figures. Participants in experiment 1A used size information to categorize the stimuli 83% of the time. T49 9.27, P.001, D1.31. Scroll. And the results were pretty striking. Across multiple variations of this experiment, people overwhelmingly prioritized average size. They were much more likely to categorize the stimuli based on how big the dots were on average, rather than how many dots there were. In one experiment, participants used size information a whopping 83% of the time. This is a clear indication that number wasn't the star of the show. Scroll 11, these results indicate not only a lack of a number bias, but a clear preference for categorizing based on the average size of the ensemble. Scroll, the researchers wanted to make sure this wasn't just a fluke for one type of task. So they tried a grouping task. Imagine a grid where each square contains a group of dots. They presented this whole grid and asked people to draw a line to divide it into two distinct groups. How would they divide it? By number or by average size? Scroll. 12 stimuli. Each stimulus space was composed of an 8 times AG grid of dot displays. See figure 3 and negative 3C dice. Scroll again, they found that people tended to group the dots based on their average size, not their number, even when they used the same setup that previously showed a number bias. When they made the number and size changes more independent, the size bias took over. They even did this with children. And guess what? The kids showed the same preference for average size over number. Scroll. 14 experiment 3, matching tasks seemingly. When given direct instructions to categorize stimuli, people tend to make their decisions based on the average size of the ensembles. Scroll, they didn't stop there. They tried a matching task. They'd show a sample image, and then two other images. One matched the sample in number but changed the size, and the other matched the sample in size but changed the number. Participants had to pick which one was more similar. Even here, when people had less time to think and were just going with their gut feeling, they consistently picked the one that matched in size. Scroll. 15 experiments 4 and negative 4D, odd 1. Outtasks, the first 3 experiments show that people preferentially categorize and match stimuli based on their average size rather than their number. Scroll, then came the odd 1 outtasks. Imagine seeing 3 groups of dots in a row. One group is a bit different from the other two. Which one is the odd one out? Is it the one with a different number of dots or the one with a different average size of dots? In all these variations, people were much more likely to pick the display with the odd average size as the odd one out, even when they controlled for things like the actual area of the dots, or if the dots within a group were all different sizes. Scroll 18 experiment 5. Min-max, the previous experiments have shown that when given a choice, participants tend to preferentially categorize displays based on average size. Rather than number. Scroll, they even tested something called min-max, which is a bit more complex. They showed 5 different displays at once and asked people to pick out the one with the smallest or largest average size, or the smallest or largest number. They found that people were slightly better at correctly identifying the displays with the minimum and maximum average size compared to those with the minimum and maximum number. Scroll 19 experiment 6. Odd one out children, part of the elegance of the paradigm posed by Ferrigno and colleagues. And the reason we were initially hesitant to make a claim against the universal number bias is that they demonstrated a bias that was robust across adults of various cultures, children, and non. Human primates. Scroll, this whole series of experiments paints a pretty clear picture. The idea that number is automatically and universally prioritized in how we perceive groups of things might be an oversimplification. Instead, the data strongly suggests that average size can be just as if not more perceptually salient. And importantly, this isn't just true for adults. Children seem to follow the same pattern. Scroll 20 general discussion across 13 experiments. We document not only a lack of a number bias, but a possible size bias in people's ability to categorize, match, and rapidly identify displays based on their ensemble properties. Scroll. So, what does this all mean? Well, it challenges the strong claims of a universal number bias. It suggests that how we perceive ensembles is more flexible and depends on the context. While number is definitely something we can perceive, it is not the automatic default priority in every situation. The fact that average size consistently wins out in these studies is fascinating. Scroll 21. It's not a competition to claim that number is uniquely perceptually salient. It is not sufficient to show that number is prioritized over some other dimension. There is a need to show that number is prioritized over all related ensemble properties. Scroll, the researchers point out that comparing number to cumulative area, as done in prior influential studies, might have had an issue. In those setups, number and area were often linked. If the number changed, the area automatically changed too, making it hard to tell if people were noticing the number or the resulting change in area. Their experiments with average size seem to have a cleaner separation of these dimensions. When there was a real choice between number and average size, size often came out on top. Scroll 22 perceptual or conceptual. Regardless of whether there is a number bias or a size bias or neither, we think it may be worth unpacking what causes people to prioritize one dimension over another in a categorization task. Like those used by Ferrigno and colleagues 2017, and throughout the experiments here, Scroll, this research doesn't say number perception isn't real or important. It absolutely is. The ability to sense number is a fundamental part of cognition, and it is crucial for things like math. However, it argues against the idea that number is always the most immediately noticeable or prioritized feature. It suggests that other visual properties like average size can be equally or even more compelling to our perception. Scroll. 23 constraints on generality. There are a few factors that may constrain the generality of these results. Scroll now. It is not perfect science, of course. The authors themselves mentioned that these studies were mostly done with people who already know about numbers, and they used online participants, so it might not apply to absolutely everyone in every culture. Also, while they tried to control for visual confounds like brightness, it is incredibly hard to isolate just one visual feature perfectly. There might be other subtle visual cues we're not fully accounting for. Still, the consistency across so many experiments and different ways of testing is really powerful. Scroll 24 conclusion. Despite everything that we've said here, it appears that number is special in at least one way. It has captured the imagination of thousands of scholars for several decades in a way that other dimensions have not. Scroll, so the big takeaway is this, that strong idea that number is always the first thing we see when looking at groups of objects. It's likely not the whole story. Our brains are constantly processing multiple pieces of visual information, and sometimes the average size of things can grab our attention more than their sheer count. This research opens up a whole new way of thinking about how we perceive the visual world, and it highlights that what seems like a simple glance might be a complex interplay of so many different features. It is a reminder that our perception is often more nuanced and context-dependent than we might assume. It makes you wonder when you look at groups of things in your daily life, what are you noticing first? What do you think about these findings? Does this surprise you or does it align with your own intuition? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into how our minds work, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to Rubin's Mind Lab for more science breakdowns, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.